after you retired from Dayton-Hudson, your position was eliminated, and at approximately the same time, another woman who held a power position with the corporate foundation also resigned. Her name was Cynthia Maeda.
Maeda.
Okay. Now, you and Miss Maeda were instrumental in saving Dayton-Hudson from that takeover. And the media quoted an insider at Dayton-Hudson as saying, the guys are now running the company. Talk a little bit about your reaction to the elimination of your position after you retired, and what it was like for a woman to be in a position of power in the 80s and the early 90s.
Cynthia and I never really knew that we were running the company, so that's sort of fun. Cynthia, actually, I think that Cynthia and I probably became best known during the Planned Parenthood issue because we were both big contributors to Planned Parenthood as individuals, and the media liked to make a lot out of that. But at any rate, it always hurts when you've built a function to see it change. But I'm sure that it's the right of every CEO of every company to organize things the way they want to organize them. And when I retired, I had promised myself I would retire by the time I was 60. I'd worked my whole life, and that was just, a couple of months before I turned 60. So that after my CEO retired, it was about 6 months before I retired because it was different, and I think when I sort of felt like the CEO needed his own press secretary, that's what happens. Sometimes you'll see the function change, get split up, whatever, and that always hurts because there's a certain degree of pride in what you have built. But you go on, you move on, and when people ask you what you think, you always don't freely offer advice because you're no longer part of the company. But it's a great company, and I think that the thing that excites me most is that now, about 13 years later, the function is now coming back together. And it's that, the pendulum swings, and the function was different when I started. We built it, we added a lot to it, and so I think probably the media was the most disappointed because we were very open and very accessible to the public. And so I think that was probably the most disappointing part. But nonetheless, it was a great 14 years. And I loved my CEO. He was just a great partner. He paid attention to things that we talked about, and we really felt like we were at the policy table. So that was important. And if you're not, why then it's time to move on and do something else. I think Cynthia felt the same way, and because the foundation changed a lot too, the external relations parts. Being a woman in a senior management position is, I guess, I just always thought of it as being part of doing what I did. When I was in my first management position in 1966, when there were not many women in public school management. You had a lot of women teachers, but not many women principals, and your district administrators were primarily all men. When I attended the first meetings of the public relations seminar and even the Page Society, when I did first come into that group, there were not a lot of women in senior leadership positions. There were more and more women going into the field, but the leaders were still mostly men. And that was, so I think it's all, there's just this era of, what you do is you work harder and you work longer hours, and you do it because I don't know that you feel like you have to prove anything. I think it's just that that's the way we are. We do work harder. We're a little bit more inclusive. I was the first woman named to the Dayton-Hudson Management Committee, which was the senior group of managers, and that was really an exciting time, and people were always asking me what it was like, and I said I was the only one who didn't have to stand in line at the bathroom breaks, because there were a lot of men, and then there was me. But and it was just an exciting time to be part of this movement of women proving that we can do whatever anyone else can do. But it was, I guess, I never wanted to be part of the mold of women in management. I wanted to be me. So when I arrived at Dayton-Hudson, now you have to remember I was a teacher for a long time, and I never wore black on a test day because I always felt, kids, I don't care how old they are, they respond to color. And I wanted them to feel upbeat about taking a test. And so I didn't own a navy blue suit. I didn't own a floppy tie. And yet that's what people were wearing. And I never bought a navy blue suit. And so I thought it was sort of, maybe it's just because I was in public relations. I thought it was fun to be a little different and pretty exciting to be leading the way. Now, a comment I would make, and I hope that young women, if they pull this tape out and look at it, will pay attention to the fact that my best mentors were men. I did not find a lot of women really interested in helping other women. And that bothered me a lot. So I think my generation of women, I have a lot of friends who are my same age, and they were also, whether they were Secretary of State of Minnesota or whatever, we always felt an obligation to try to help other women. And we formed women's network groups to try to help women learn the skills. But it was hard because there was something about, there weren't a lot of women supporting other women, and that bothered me. So I'm a big supporter of, whenever asked to speak to a women's group, I never say no.
Let's talk a minute about counseling. I've had other interviews with other Page Society members, and they've expressed some concern over the current state of corporate public relations and the decline in the number of PR counselors to corporate CEOs. It's been noted that individuals who've been indicted in recent waves of corporate scandals, and there have been many of those, have not held PR positions. So does that mean that those of you who held the counseling positions were the ethics police, guiding the upper management towards making correct ethical decisions? Is the trend changing now? Are we getting back into having counselors to CEOs and having the PR person at the policy-making table?
I don't feel quite as discouraged about corporate PR in the last decade as some may have been. I think we have fewer companies today because there have been so many mergers, and so we don't see maybe as many people, and a lot of senior people retired, and functions may have shifted or changed a little bit or been integrated in a different way. But I feel like there's still wonderful, solid corporate public relations practice going on today, and there are still hundreds of people sitting at the table helping CEOs make decisions. So I guess I'm not quite as gloom and doom about that as some may be. Maybe it isn't all being done the way it used to be, but I don't think that's all that bad. I do believe that the role has changed as you would expect it to, because we have more things available to us. I mean, we talk about how the kinds of technology we have available. Those of us that started on a manual typewriter and then, thought we had died and gone to heaven when we had a self-correcting selectric, where you didn't have to or you didn't have to use carbon paper anymore, or things like that. And going from mailing news releases to faxing news releases to the electronic transfer of something, when you're disclosing information. I don't mean that everything is news releases, but for those times when you have to make public announcements, to now just going, on the wire directly. I mean, it's amazing, the speed of information, and I think that has changed a lot of what we do. The being at the table, we used to always say, oh, if we could just get to the table. I wasn't quite so sure it was all of that glorious at times to be at the table, but the fact is, what you want to be a place where you have the ear of the CEO, and where you can, because it's what you're doing are really the CEO's job. And so, I mean, in terms of public relationships, the reputation of the corporation. And so you become a partner. It isn't just you doing it. I mean, you're the CEO's partner. So I think that our counseling role is still there. It just may not be in the same form that it used to be. But I do feel like CEOs are still listening a lot. At least the CEOs I know are still paying a lot of attention to what their chief communications officer, chief public relations officer is telling them. Now, when you do have a problem, then I always say to people, pray for a crisis. Because whenever you have a crisis, then everybody says, where are those PR people? Let's bring them in here and let them show what they can do. And that is a time. I mean, it's just not all crises are bad. It's a great time to show what we can do, and to really show how we have as much business sense as anyone else. If we have lost that key to the door, if we've lost that, then I think it's because we haven't paid enough attention to how business is changing, or we've wanted to hold on to an old way of doing something when we needed to move more into a strategic counseling mindset, and not just into tactics or, we can solve this by working with the media. There isn't time. By the time the paper comes out or a television program goes on, someone's been yelling on a blog or somewhere they've already changed how people think about a company. So it's an exciting time, but I just think it's a kind of a different time for PR people. It doesn't fit the old model.